Good morning. So how you guys doing? Do we have any people awake here on the stream today? So my bandwidth looks like it's going a little bit in and out this morning, so hopefully it holds together. I guess there must be some possible outages around where I'm at. So hopefully the stream goes smoothly and there will be no spinning wheels of death. So welcome to another episode of Ask ZBrush Live. And you guys are watching this on Twitch. So this is our Ask ZBrush section of Twitch channel here, where you guys can ask questions and I will attempt to answer them. Sometimes I answer them correctly. So last week I definitely told you guys the wrong way to get your default material not to be red wax, and I tried to get that secondary video up as fast as possible. So the one that is on the YouTube channel with the Ask ZBrush is the correct way to make the red wax material not your startup material. So I do occasionally get wrong and give you the wrong answer, so we're going to try not to do that today. So today's lineup, you just had Michael Pavlovich, who just went. Then you have myself, and then you have Shane Olson here in the afternoon. You can tune in to our streaming channel here on Twitch by just going to ZBrush Live or pixologic.com/ZBrush Live. And here you'll be able to see the stream right here. And there's also a varying degree of information on this page as well. So if you guys are unfamiliar with the Ask ZBrush system, this is a thing we do here at Pixologic where you can use the hashtag AskZBrush, and then this is done on our Twitter channel here. And if you use that hashtag, I'll go through this list pretty much every week, and I try to answer the questions that are given if they can be answered in a short video. Some of them may not get answered, so the best way, if you posted a question and it did not get answered through my weekly videos, definitely tune in to the Ask ZBrush Live and try going that route, because sometimes you get questions that will just, the answer is either no or it's just like a one-word answer. So the one here that we have here about can I scale models in ZBrushCore to make all the figures the same size as an STL file. So inside of ZBrushCore, the size measurements, which exist in the export scale area and also the geometry size area in the professional version of ZBrush, do not exist in ZBrushCore. So if you want to get everything the same size, you're going to have to merge those models into one tool and then export those out, and then they should be relatively scaled to each other, but the measurement systems are not available inside of ZBrushCore. And then the other things with the UVs and texture maps, this one I may do a video on adding UVs and texture maps. If you have polypaint on a mesh, you can go through and just quickly generate some UVs and then transfer that polypaint to a texture. And then this one here, I'll probably do this video on this one as well. So this was using Dynamesh, and the hole where he had cut out is now being filled, and he's just asking how you can trim this out. So this one, you just use the trim brush to come through there and trim that out. You're going to lose some of your topology, but you can end up getting that hole back to where it is. And then, is there a plugin for a color wheel? So there is currently not one that I know of. So some questions like those would not get resolved particularly in a video. So if you have asked a question like that, tune in definitely to this Ask ZBrush Live session here on Twitch, and I'll try to answer those. So yeah, we maybe having some sound things this morning, and this is potentially due to my bandwidth. So hopefully they will resolve themselves. It's just always hit or miss for my internet. My internet is like up and down. It's like a roller coaster over here. You never really know. So after you have these questions asked on the Twitter channel here, I'll go through and do these videos, and these can be found on our YouTube channel. And if you guys are looking for specific questions, or maybe questions have already been answered, just do a search. You can do it in Google, do it in YouTube, and just do Ask ZBrush, and then search with your questions. All these videos here, so this one is the first series here, so volume 1, there's 200 questions answered here, and I've gone through and added the meta tags and everything for this. So if you have something related to topology, hopefully that video will pop up if you type topology in the search. So both these playlists here both have something like that. We are looking into some way to kind of organize these a little bit better, maybe on our site as well, where we'll try to group up different things to different areas inside of ZBrush, so topology, and then have those Ask ZBrush questions and so on and so forth. Also integrating them into our support site eventually as well. So another outlet for if you have questions on ZBrush is go to our support site, which is support.pixologic.com. Here you can submit a support ticket. So if you're having any sort of issues with ZBrush that you think may be potential bugs, or you have like a crash or something that's happening repeatedly, so every time I do this it crashes, like that's definitely something we would love you guys to send in through our support.pixologic.com so we can get it looked at and resolved. We also have a knowledge base as well here, which is basically an FAQ. And in here you have various answers to questions that we get asked a lot. So if you haven't found your answer through Ask ZBrush, you could try the knowledge base here on support.pixologic.com, and then you should be able to find some answers there as well. And then finally we have ZBrush Central, which is our forums, and there you can ask your questions in here. There's a whole section for Z scripting help and even just general troubleshooting. So you can go to ZBrushCentral.com and ask a question there, and then our support personnel will look at that, and also the community as well. And so we have a lot of great community artists. A lot of them do the streaming here on our Twitch channel, and they're often very willing to help answer any questions you may have related to ZBrush and different workflows and pipelines. So all sorts of ways you can get information on ZBrush. So if you guys have any questions, definitely type them in the chat here in Twitch, and then I can get them answered. If not, I'm just going to go on tangents. This is how this session works. So if you guys have questions, I'll definitely try to answer those to the best of my ability. And if not, then I'm going to take you on a joyride of various tangents, which is what I usually end up doing in a lot of this stuff. So we're going to hop over to ZBrush here, and we're going to just start right out on a tangent, just right into a tangent here. And I want to talk about live booleans and insert mesh objects, and how you can create a negative shape and then flip it to make it a negative IMM. They can then use on your meshes inside of ZBrush to create negative cuts. And if you guys aren't doing this, this is a huge thing, and it's greatly easy to do. It allows you a lot of creative freedom. So I'm just going to go through that process. So the first thing I want to do is I want to make a simple IMM shape, and I'm just going to go through how I kind of do this. I use a lot of zmodeler for a lot of my modeling inside of ZBrush. So if I'm sculpting, I'll use sculpting brushes to kind of work out shapes and designs. But then on the other side, I'll use zmodeler and just model stuff really quick. So there's like two different workflows my brain usually heads down. One's pure sculpting and one's more technical kind of thing like that. So I'm going to show the zmodeler process I use. So oftentimes I'll start with a simple cylinder for a lot of my shapes. Usually boxes and cylinders are the main primitives I start from when using zmodeler. And one thing I do is when I'll start with a cylinder, which usually looks like this, I'll usually first just make this a poly mesh, and that's the quickest way to kind of get it to this aspect here. And then I usually always go to the geometry tab here, go to the edge loop area, and then do the delete loops here, which is going to remove all those subdivisions around the edges. And then I'll switch to, say, the zmodeler brush. And the zmodeler brush is context sensitive, so as you hover over different areas on your model, like a point, an edge, or a face, you'll get different options. And so I'll come through and start establishing usually an edge loop on the top and then an edge loop on the bottom. And this is usually my basic building block for a lot of stuff I model with zmodeler. So I have one that's already set up so that these lips are the correct range. So I made sure that they had the same size on both, so it's even. And I'm just going to model a simple shape here. So let's say I have some sort of design. I'm going to model kind of an oval shape, so something similar to this part here, so something like this. And the process of doing this inside of ZBrush with zmodeler is actually pretty simple. So I have my cylinder, and I want to just mask out half of it. So I want to mask from the center line over. And to do this, there's two ways you could do this. So I could hold down Control, and this is just giving me my normal mask. And inside ZBrush, when you draw this out and you let go, anything that's inside that box is going to get masked. Now there's an alternate functionality that was added in ZBrush 4.8. So if you hold down Control and hold down Alt, you're going to get the white masking box, which is going to look like this. And what this does is it's going to work more like a selection. So if I hover over these edges with the white option instead of the black option here, so this is holding Control, and if you have Alt pressed, you get this one. If you have Alt released, you get the normal mask. And if I just engulf part of this with the Control and Alt held, and then release, what this does is it's going to unmask that section that was inside that box, and then mask everything else out. So it's like a selection rather than a mask. So this is handy if you just want to grab a part and you don't want to have to mask a whole bunch of stuff. You know exactly where you are. You can do the inverse and just holding down Alt. So now I've masked this whole side of the sphere here, or the cylinder here, and this side is unmasked. And now I can switch to the gizmo, and I can hold down Control and then use the move Z axis here, and this will perform an extrude function. So as I click and drag here, it's going to extrude out, and now I can make a quick oval shape. So this is one of the things I use quite a bit for just generating different shapes. Just take that cylinder and start changing it to get things like this. And if you have your edges, like this edge line set up beforehand, you can now easily come in and add different loops here really quick to get different shapes. And if you want to add a simple bevel to this, I can just add an edge to the side here and then remove that. So now I have a kind of a beveled lip edge there. And I can add some creasing as well. So if you hover over an edge and go and press spacebar, you'll get to the zmodeler edge action menu. And in here there's a crease option. And you can change your target to edge loop complete. And now I can add a crease. And the creasing option will just give you the ability to have those edges be harsh. So if you activate dynamic subdivision by going to the tool palette, then going to the geometry area, and then going to the dynamic subdivision area here, you can turn this on. And this will now give you a version of your mesh as it would look if you subdivided it. So it's a dynamic subdivision. So the model is still this low polygon version, but now you're getting it previewed as if you just came up here and kept hitting divide. So when using the ZModeler brush and this dynamic subdivision, you can start getting different designs really quick with this. So a lot of stuff I model end up doing this kind of process to start designing stuff. So I'm just going to make a simple shape here as well. So I want to like punch this side in. So I want to make just this a new area that I can select and then use the Q mesh action. So to do this, you can hold down Alt, and this will give you a temporary polygroup. And wherever you click on a face, it's going to now give you a temporary polygroup in that area. And this is another kind of like a selection. So you can hold down Alt and select the areas you want. And then now I can perform a Q mesh action on a poly. And this will now perform it across that entire area. So I can now bring this down, and now I've got this shape. Then I can come in and add some edge loops in here as well. Now you can also bevel this if you want, but a lot of times, sometimes you get a little more greater control if you just add 2 edge loops and then hold down Alt and delete the intersection one. And that'll give you that nice kind of edge softening there. And I can strengthen these edges as well. So now I have this design pretty quick. I can add some creasing here if I want to. So hovering over one of the edges, going back to crease. Crease that out, crease this out, and that out. And now if I activate that dynamic subdivision and turn off my polyframes, you can now see I have this shape. So a little bit more of a design there. And now I can add some little more elements here. So I'm going to come through and add some edge loops on the side here. But to do this, instead of adding a single edge loop and trying to guess the width of each of these, I'm going to use the multi-edge loop option. So if I hover over this edge here and go spacebar back into the ZModeler edge action menu, I can select the target of multi-edge loops. And then in here, I'm going to make sure my specified elevation is at 0. I don't want any elevation here. And now I can click and drag, and now I can add edge loops. They'll be spaced out evenly. So if you ever want to find out the middle point, you can use this and just add 1, and this will always add an edge loop directly in the center of those 2 points. So now I clearly have a edge line that is directly in the middle there, and I can add some more to the sides here. So maybe one like that, and then I'll get the center there. So now I've divided this up evenly. Now I want to add another edge loop here. So I'm not going to do it multiple this time, I'm just going to do it normal, just to add that in there, and then maybe add one there. Then I'm going to grab these 2 polys, so hold Alt and click to select those. And I want to do it on the same other side as well. So I grab both of those. And this is that white temporary poly group. And now I can perform a Q mesh action on those, and I can start getting that shape. And then let's say I want to add an edge loop there. Now if I did this on the correct symmetry line, this would be a lot easier. I could go and change my symmetry, but we're just going to go with this right now. And I want to remove this edge here to give me another little border lip. So there we go. And if you don't want to go through and crease everything manually, you can also go to the Geometry tab over here and go to the Crease area. And in here you have a tolerance, and I can click Crease. And that will now apply creasing to that. And then I can go and refine that creasing too. So I'm going to go to Edge this time instead of Edge Loop Complete. And just go in and custom add some edges there. And now if I hit D on my keyboard or come over here and activate that dynamic option here, I can now preview that mesh with dynamic subdivisions. So now I have this little kind of shape here. And I want to do one more thing quick. So another thing with the zmodeler brush and using it, you can go through and add some lines and cut stuff in, but another really cool thing that you can use is the clip brush. So you can use slice brush with a rectangle shape to just add some different designs and different elements. So I'm going to hold down Control and Shift, and it's going to give me my select rectangle brush. I'm going to open this up, and in here I'm going to find the slice brush, and we want slice rectangle. So I'm going to select that here. And now with slice rectangle, I can come across the surface here and draw out the slice rectangle here. And when I release, it's going to go through and slice that area and give me a new polygroup. So you can see now it's gone through, it's added these edge lines in here, it's added the triangle cuts for me. And now I can come across this, use the Q mesh action on polygroup all, and now I can start generating different shapes with this. So let me move this here. If I got the right tangent here, it should be polygroup all. We're going to do single poly here. And so you can start adding different design elements. So I've just cut that face out. And let me do this one again. We'll do this slice rectangle here. And now we're going to grab this one again with polygroup all and move it in a little bit. So now I have that little design. And this was a real handy way to come through and just add different design elements, especially using the zmodeler brush. So now that I have something like this, I'm going to crease it one more time and then activate that dynamic subdivision in just to make sure everything looks good. And then I'm going to shrink the bottom of this part here and just move this up. So using that selection option, so Control and Shift or Control, and then holding Alt, which will mask everything but the area that's in this area. And now I can recenter my gizmo here. So here's another thing, if you ever want to recenter your gizmo, so let's say I have my gizmo here, but my model's off the screen and I can't see it, right? So if you hold down Alt and then click and drag, that will take that gizmo and place it where you clicked. So it does like this unlock option here, basically, and unlock option here, but it allows you to do it like pretty easily. So if your mesh is way down at the bottom of the screen, but you want it right here, just make sure you're in the gizmo, you have move on, hold down Alt and click, and that's going to reposition that gizmo 3D to where you are. So you can get it back inside your focus, and now it's no longer hanging off in the middle of the screen. So if you ever lose your gizmo 3D and you want it back, just make sure you have the gizmo selected, hold Alt and click on a mesh surface, and then that will put that gizmo right there. And then if you click and drag while still holding Alt, you'll then realign it to the world. So click and drag will realign it back to that XYZ axis, and so you can reposition your gizmo using this, just holding Alt and clicking. So if it's ever off screen, you can get it back. And then if you want it just to the unmasked center point, you can use this button here, and that'll look at the masking and then apply that there. So there we have my little shape there. So let's say I want to take this, and then I want to do one more thing here. I'm going to add another insert edge loop here. And I'm going to polygroup this entire strip so I can use it. So polygroup, polyloop, and then you can hit Alt to change your polygroup as you do this. And then a Q mesh polygroup all again, and just pull it out like this. So let's say I want this shape on my mesh, but then I want it to kind of have a hole cut into it as well. So I'm going to polygroup this out one more time here, polyloop this, pull this up. So now I have something like this. And now let's say I want to have this as a subtractive form. So when I go into my mesh here and subtract this out, this is the shape I want. So I want it to be inverted. Hold on, I got a question. Reading quick. So question here asking, asking about the topology brush, and he said the question is asking, it's working about 80% of the times, but sometimes it crashes instantly when I turn the topology brush into a mesh. And the user here, Tim, is using 48P2. So as long as it's working, that is definitely a strange behavior. If it's a repeatable one that you can keep happening all the time, definitely that is a question to send into support.pixologic.com so we can look at that. It could be something mesh related, it could be a bug. Definitely that is one to submit to us so we can see if we can track it down. And if it is 100% repeatable, that's definitely one we definitely want to see. So please submit a support ticket to support.pixologic.com. All right, so back onto the shape here. So let's say I have that here, and now I want it to be inverted. And another option of this would be this shape here. And so I have this that I modeled out. So using similar processes where I held Alt and used it, and then generate the shape. So let's say I want this shape, something like this, to appear on my mesh. So I want to use the boolean system, and when I subtract this out, I want this to come out of it. So if you're using the boolean system, and say I take this and just make this an insert mesh brush really quick. And now let's go to a example shape here. So here we're just going to use this head here for now. And I just have this as an insert mesh. So off on another tangent here. But when you're using insert meshes, they will come out on your mesh just drawn out like normally. If you're in solo and you draw it out, your mesh is going to vanish. So if you ever have this happening and you're wondering why this is happening, where I draw out and my mesh goes invisible, make sure you have solo turned off, and then that will no longer happen. So one little tangent trick there. So with the insert mesh brush here, I can draw this out on my mesh, right? But I want it to draw out and cut into the surface. So I can use the boolean system for this. So with this shape here, I can now draw it out onto my mesh. And use the boolean system, you need to have two subtools. So you can't really draw it out on your original subtool, you need to have it in its own subtool. So if you can draw it out once, and then you can split the unmasked part into its own subtool by just going to the subtool palette over here, going to split, and then do split unmasked points. And this will take the parts I just drew out from that IMM and now give it a new subtool. So this is an easy way to come through, draw an insert mesh shape out once and then split it. And then now you have a new subtool. And now since this is a new subtool, I can set this to subtractive and then turn on live boolean. And if my depth is set a little more relative here, you can see I can start drawing these out, and it's going to start subtracting the shape from my model. Now this is a pretty interesting little shape here. So I've got a carved cutout, and then I'm getting this kind of exposed circles here. So you may not really want this. It is giving an interesting effect, but what we wanted was this shape here to get cut into the model and then look like this. So we wanted to use this. And right now this shape is in a positive format. So when you're using the booleans, it's going to take the shape you have and it's going to subtract it and make it negative. So you may be thinking, well, I could just make an insert mesh brush facing the wrong way, and then it's going to cut out this shape, right? So let's try that real quick. Let's go to brush, create insert mesh, new, and then let's go back to our head here that we're making this crazy mess out of. We now have our new shape here. We'll make sure our embed depth is shrunk down a little bit. So let's try that one. Let's do it right on the forehead there. So we're getting this, right? So I just flipped it, I'm carving it out, but we're still getting it inverted, so it's still not correct. So this is now cutting that sphere out into the head. It's facing in the right direction, but it's not giving me this. So I want to draw this out on my mesh and get this. I want this exact thing. So wherever I draw out, I get this sphere generated as it cuts into the surface of the mesh. So what we need to do is I need to inverse this, or basically flip it inside out. So you can take any insert mesh object or any insert mesh or piece of geometry, and there's a little trick you can do to flip it. And basically all it involves is that you have this edge, like a back edge on it. So you need to first make your mesh solid, and so you model it positive how you want it, and then make this little border shape that goes around it. And now that I have this border shape, to flip it inside out, all you have to do is grab the edge of this one border, and we're going to use that Alt option again, so just make sure that that part's selected. We're going to switch to our Gizmo 3D, and we're just going to take this outer edge here and pull it this way, and we've now flipped our shape, right? So we've turned our shape inside out. Now you'll notice that the normals are still flipped, So what we need to do now, after we invert it like this, so basically think of a sock, right? So if you take a sock and pull one of the edges over the other side, you've now flipped the sock. So that's all we're doing here with our positive shape. So we modeled it positively so we can see exactly how we want it. And then we're taking it and pulling it, basically flipping it. So we now get an inverted effect like this. And now we can go down here to our display properties and now use flip. And now we have the negative version of our shape. So we have now modeled it positive because it's a lot easier to model positive than it is to model negative. But now we flipped it inside out. So now we can use this with the booleans as an insert mesh subtraction brush. And now when we draw this out on the model, we're going to get this exact shape. So now I just need to create this into an insert mesh. So I'm going to make sure that the side that is going into the model is facing backwards into the camera. And now we're going to brush, create insert mesh. It's going to create a new one here. So now we have our shape here. Now if we go back to the head here, and now I draw this one out on my mesh. I'm going to make sure that depth is changed here. You can see now we're going to start getting something like this. Now you will have to play with the depth slider a little bit to get it to where you want it. But you can see as I draw it out now, it's going to now generate that subtractive form. And now I'm going to get these circular shapes in there. So this is probably very confusing. I swear it makes sense. So now you can do this. So now I can back in here and I can adjust that shape, let's say some more. So let's say I want it to taper a little bit. So I'm going to mask this part here. I'm now going to scale this, make sure I'm centered in the center there, scale it so it gets this kind of taper to it. I'm going to make this brush one more time here. And I just blew up ZBrush. Uh-oh. Don't look. Don't look. It wasn't the topology brush though, so I don't know. All right, we're back. So let's rework our shape here really quick. Luckily, I've already had this started. There we go, and then we're just going to scale this back here. You guys didn't see anything. I did not crash ZBrush, just to let you know. I might have, but you guys didn't see anything. Don't tell. All right, so there's my shape, and then let's go and create a new insert mesh brush out of this. Let's go back to the head here. Do that same process again. So I got my insert mesh shape. Now you can draw it out in this mode. You can kind of see the depth. This helps here. So then you come through to the depth area here and adjust this as necessary. So we're going to try 10. That should be pretty good there. And then we're just going to draw one out really quick. And then we're going to go to the subtool split to unmasked points, which is going to give us our new tool here. Set that as subtractive and then turn on live boolean. So now we're getting this effect on our mesh here. We're going to adjust that depth a little bit more. So if we need to go positive, so let's go to 20. Nope, we need to go the other way. Let's do -5 here. Almost. -8. There we go. So now, wherever we draw out with this IMM brush on our mesh, it's now going to give this result. Now, after you have an IMM brush 2, since this is its own subtool, I can activate dynamic subdivision on that. And since I set up that shape for dynamic subdivision, you can see as I draw it out now, it's going to give a nice smooth result. So I can go through and start drawing all these things on my mesh. Now, another thing nice about the Boolean system here is that it's live. So it is interactive right now. So I can add, I can modify, I can change anything as I want. And I can also sculpt on this mesh. So this mesh here is still this Dynamesh model. And this is what the mesh looks like. So at any time, even with the Boolean subtraction process happening, I can still come in here and design around these. So I can come through and smooth this out, move it around, and it's going to keep all those Booleans live. So this is really handy for coming in and starting to play with forms and stuff, because you can just use this even on like a real low-res mesh, and you can add these intricate details on it and not have to worry about making any like commitments or final, choices. So you can come through and start playing with this and start getting different stuff. So another example of this process is, let's say I have something like this helmet here, and this one's broken into multiple subtools here. And these are all Dynamesh parts. So if I go through and look at all these, you can see that they're all individual Dynameshes. So I came through and just, sculpted some shapes out and some designs. And they're just all, pretty low res. So if I took this shape, let's get an example. Let's take this one here. And let's say I want to add, that circular design in, right? So I could try to come in here and try sculpting this to try to get that spherical effect, right? So like sculpting in, sculpting out. Maybe I have some alphas I want to apply. But you can see there's really no resolution in there. So I'd have to divide this mesh up, quite a bit to get that nice little circular shape. But if I use the booleans, so just by taking this shape here, and then let's take that brush we just created, and I draw it out, and then we're going to split that again. So go to split unmasked points. And now with that one selected, I can turn it into a negative there and get out of solo. And now you can see I'm getting this. And I can turn the dynamic subdivision on. And now I have this result. So this is still that low resolution Dynamesh here. And now I'm getting that high resolution detail from my boolean. And so this is extremely awesome for going in and adding different designs. So you can flush out your main shape really quick and then go in with these added detail parts and add all sorts of stuff. And this will work pretty much anywhere you have a surface normal. So I can come across and just drag it out here. And now instead of sculpting these, I've added this little detail to the edge there. And these are all separate pieces of geometry too. So if I find out that I don't like this one here, I can just isolate this subtool here, and then I can just find that part, and we'll just mask this out really quick. And now I can even use the Gizmo 3D on this. So let me go back and use that, and I can move it around. So maybe I don't want it there. Maybe it's too deep. I can modify it, and then maybe I can even just get rid of it, right? So I can hide it, and then go to the geometry, modify topology area, and do a delete hidden, and now it's gone. So this is a lot of flexibility, really good flexibility, and you can use it on pretty much any meshes. So it's going to be that low resolution. It can be that low resolution Dynamesh. It can be some Z-sphere geometry thrown together. Just append a new subtool and start subtracting from it. So really handy stuff there. So I've been on tangents. So let me go check these questions here. So one question here, if you wanted to take that into Substance Painter, how would you do it? Would you manually retopo or Z-remesh? So with this shape here, let's say, the big thing with the Substance Painter stuff is that you need a set of UVs. So you want to get it to somewhere where you can get a UVs on it, and then you can go and paint on it. If that's your goal, then you just need to turn it into a mesh. So for the Boolean system, getting a mesh result from your inserted shapes like this is really easy. So it's going to look at whatever subtools you have visible, and it's going to go through the chain. So it's going to look at this one here, and then it's going to subtract that one. And since I have nothing left here, it's just going to generate this shape as a new tool. So I can, with the live Boolean system on, I have this part cut out. So I've got this, which looks like that, and then I've got my negative shapes that look like this. Now, these have their own topology, so if I want it low resolution, I can turn off that dynamic subdivision there. And then let's say for the helmet here, 40,000 is a little bit too high, so let's just go ahead and Z-remesh that really quick. So I'm going to come down to the Z-remesh area here and just click Z-remesh on this. So now we're at 13, so let's do a half. So now we're at 6. So now I still have that shape, right? And if you put it in somewhere that's going to preview in smooth normals, you get a different result here. ZBrush is always hard normals there, so you can see the facetting in here, but if you render it in like OpenGL, another viewer, this would smooth out. And then I have my insert mesh shapes that are set to subtraction, and they're low resolution, so they're not super high. And now I can just make a new mesh out of this. And it's going to give me this exact thing here, and the only areas of topology change are going to be around those circles. So if I have this one here and go to the Boolean area, which is in the subtool Boolean area. If you have dynamic subdivision on, you want to enable this. Since I turned it off, I don't really need to have it on. And now I can click Make Boolean Mesh. And if this goes through here, I may have just crashed ZBrush again. You'll have a new mesh that'll be generated here in the top of the tool palette, and this is the result. So it's kept the topology from those original shapes. Now, when you use the Boolean system and it goes through the process, it will keep the geometry exactly how it was. So it's going to remember the topology between those objects and keep it, and it's only going to change the areas of the topology around those surfaces. Now, one thing it's not going to do is not going to keep UVs. So at this stage, after you have your mesh completed, you will now need to apply some UVs to it. Now, there is also a thing now that happens with the UV master that is currently getting looked into, is that if you try to use UV master on this right now, UV master does have difficulty with these triangles around the edges. So you would at this stage need to either export out to unwrap it elsewhere to get that result you're looking for, or you would have to ZRemesh it again before you can apply UVs inside of ZBrush. But you can also just use, if you just want to get it quick and dirty, you can also go down to the UV map tab here and go to create. You can set your UV size pretty large and use something like PUV tiles or AUV or GUV. And these are just going to auto tile it. It's going to give you texture coordinates for your mesh, which you can then use to bake maps off and things like that. When you open up that texture map, however, you're never going to understand what's going on there. So if you're planning on hand painting any textures, it's not going to give you the result you want. But let's say, as an example, I just created PUV tiles for that. Now if I do new from UV map, you can see this is what the UV space looks like. So it's taken pretty much every space and generated a map for each thing. And this is going to give you a universal ratio. So all the triangles here are going to match up identically to the resolution that your mesh has. So it's cramming everything in. So this gives you a great texture resolution across the entire surface of your mesh, but it does generate a map that you're not going to be able to paint on. So you'll be able to use it in things like Substance or even in ZBrush here to paint and then bake to it, and it's going to give you the result you want, but it's basically just splitting up each face as its new area there. So not really, probably not exactly what you're looking for, but if you need to do something just quick and dirty, use the Boolean system, get your shapes, and then use the PUV, AUV, or GUV to generate that mapping quickly there. And then now you can take this and you have UVs on it and a mesh, and you can then drag that out to another application to paint on it, such as Substance. Does that help at all, Bones? And this process here of the AUVs and PUVs also works well for like scan data or just transferring stuff. So if you ever have polypaint and you want to just add it quickly, get it to a map quickly so you can use it, previs, stuff like that. It's very quick because it always will work on pretty much any polygon count model, and it'll get you those quick UVs off there. So little things there, and these are all different kind of algorithms on it. So the PUV will just change the packing for that. So if you do new from UV map now, you can see it will shift a little bit. So this is going to kind of try to keep some larger chunks in the area. So you can see this whole thing here is a chunk. It's going to go through and try to keep stuff a little bit more relative in the chunking that it produces instead of where it's every single face. So you'll have a little bit less seams if you use that process there. But that is the general result there. And with this, let me just reload this file here quick. So I get back to the helmet example here. You guys are quiet on the questions today. Everybody must be asleep. Or I've reached the amount of videos that just answers everything. I don't think that's possible. Let me find out where is this project? Wait for it. I got too many ZBrush installs. Too many. There we go. All right, so let's go back to my helmet here. And this one. Oh, really? I didn't save this one. I'd have to search for it again. Hold on. Oh, wait for it. There's no need to be shy. I only bite if it's a full moon. It's the only time. Let's see here. So has anyone getting ready to take any vacation for the holidays. I'm ready. I'll probably just ZBrush my entire vacation, but... Oh man, I don't know if I can find this. Too many files. Too many files. Alright, well, we'll just show you this aspect then. Alright, so back to the helmet here. Now, if you want to try this in a ZBrush already, so if you already have a 4.8 P2 and you don't want to go through the process of making your own, you can definitely just try this as well on any model. So basically, the other process that I use instead of splitting the masking is to just set a subtool initially as a cube and then set that to subtractive, and then it's going to automatically just use an embed brush on that subtool. So here I have an example helmet with all those parts again, and I'm just going to append in a polymesh 3D. This is going to take that and put it all the way down to the bottom of my subtool list. And then from here, I'm going to go back down to the initialize menu here and just click Q-Cube. And if I turn on transparent, you'll see it's generated this cube. So now I can take this and say scale it down a little bit. And so I'll do this process. We'll just append a cube basically to my scene, and then I'm just going to embed it in the mesh. So it can be anywhere. I usually just embed it somewhere down at the bottom so it's easily selectable so I can get rid of it later if needed. And then after that's there, now I can go back up to my subtool palette here. I can set that to subtractive. And now that's going to be seen as a subtractive shape. So just as we did with the split, this now here is a subtractive form. And it's going to look at all the tools above it, and it's going to start subtracting from that. So this one has a start group, so I need to turn that off. So now it's going to look at the whole thing. So you can set up your Boolean processes to be broken into areas. So if I only want this box, say, to be subtracted from this form and this one, you can set up a start group. And so the Boolean is going to process from the top to bottom, and it's going to look at these start groups, and that's going to give a new instance of the Boolean. If you want an example of that, you can go to the project tab inside of ZBrush, go to the Boolean area, and there's a computer case fan project here. And they'll cover some more of the, show you a good example of using two sets of start groups to generate Boolean meshes. There's also a tutorial that goes along with this on ZClassroom. So if you want to hear more of my voice, you can load up this model here and then follow along with the video on ZClassroom, and they'll go through the Boolean process as well. There's also videos on ZClassroom on how to find and fix Boolean errors. So the Boolean system does require you to have meshes that are watertight. It doesn't like single-sided meshes. It doesn't like shared edges, things like that. So if you run into any of those non-manifold edges, there's a video on ZClassroom that'll go through how you can kind of solve or find those issues. Because we do have in the render tab up here, there is a render booleans here, and here we have an option that will show you coplanar faces, and then also an option that will show issues. So if you're running into that little dialog that pops up that says your boolean cannot be performed, there are ways to check your mesh. So we didn't just leave you hanging and being like, just figure it out. There is two options here that you can look at the results that was created and the errors and figure out where those issues may be happening, and then you can resolve them. And then when you process with live boolean again, you should give that good result. But in general, the Boolean process is very robust, and I've thrown a lot of garbage meshes at it, and it definitely handles itself pretty well and usually gives me the result I'm looking for. So I've appended a cube, and I've set it to subtraction, and now there's this IMM Boolean brush, and in here, if I press M, you can see all the parts that are in this. So this is the similar shape of the effects that I was creating. If anytime you want to see what any of these look like in their final form, you can just select one of these guys here. You can just go to a new tool, say like the Polymesh 3D, then go to Geometry, go to Modify Topology, and do Mesh from Brush, and that will take the IMM part and give you a new subtool out of it. So you can see this is the result of this shape here, so that little cylinder ball. Now you'll notice that on this, I basically mirrored this, and so you may be wondering, well, why is this symmetrical? And this is done symmetrically, so you get this nice preview at the top here, so you can see what your part looks like. Because you may remember when I created this shape here, I created it like this, right? So I went to Brush, create insert mesh, and did new, and it gave me a new shape. But you can see what the preview is, right? So the preview is the back of the shape. I have no clue that it looks like this. So unless I name these, it's very hard to kind of tell what that insert mesh part looks like. So to alleviate this, what I did is I took these insert mesh parts and then mirrored them. And so this gives you the side that's going to subtract, and then it also gives you a side that you can now use as the preview for when you see it up here or press M on your keyboard. So if I take this shape now and go brush, create new insert mesh, and do new, you can see now I have this. So now I get a example of what this shape looks like. So I know just by visually looking at this, this is the sphere shape that cuts into the mesh, and now I can select that and draw it out on my surface. So back to the helmet here with that box selected, and I'm gonna go back to that IMM boolean brush here, and now I can start drawing these out on my mesh. So here's that ball radar thing again. So if I want one right here, I can just click and drag. And let me make sure I have live boolean turned on, and I'm drawing onto my mesh here. Wait for it, wait for it. Where'd you go, boolean brush? Oh, start group. Start group got me. So remember the start groups. So there we go. So now I can draw this out, and you can see I'm going to get that ball radar there. I can activate that dynamic subdivision again, and I can go through and just start adding these different parts to my mesh. And once again, these are all Dynameshed models. There's nothing really high resolution about them, but with these Boolean shapes, you can now start adding these high resolution details to the surface of your mesh. So this can be done with anything. It doesn't need to be just zmodeler meshes or anything. You can also set up, Dynameshed parts and use them like this. So it's very handy for going in and just experimenting. If you don't like things, you can remove them, you can delete them. They work with symmetry. You can use them with curves. So it's very good way to kind of flesh out shapes and designs. Symmetry, everything works. So you can come through and start adding designs for your shapes. Questions, let's see. So zmodeler question here. Can you extrude an edge on a 2D plane along the plane's edge axis? For example, you want to create a silhouette of a hard surface model without committing to thickness. So generally, no. So thickness is your what the zmodeler brush likes, but you can kind of do this. This is not going to give you your full answer here. So let's say I have my single-sided geometry here and delete hidden on that. And let's say I want to take this and start conforming it down. So it's a little bit of a trick thing here. So in general, if you want to start extruded stuff out, you need to have thickness. So if I try to take these edges here and try to start extruding this, you can see nothing's going to happen because it needs that thickness value. But what you can do is, if that's the kind of workflow you want to do, you can add an edge loop in this space here, and then you can now go ahead and grab the move. I should have the move multi-edge loop here. I thought we had one. I'll get my masking here. So you can add that edge, and now you can move that edge out. It's not a simple hold, control, and drag as it would be if it was thickness, but this would allow you to come through and set your area, add your loop, and then just move it. So not exactly the answer you're probably looking for, but without thickness, you can't really have the same control. And so a lot of things inside of ZBrush do require thickness. So the normal way to do this would be you have thickness on your mesh, and now when you extrude out this area here, you can see I can start extruding this, and I can even do flat island on this, and I can start extruding this out, and then you can start tapering it and moving it around. But that's really without thickness, you're not going to be able to do that. It's basically related to the thickness of your mesh. And even if when you have the thickness on it, it's definitely, the workflow goes a lot faster. So you can control drag, and that's going to duplicate that shape. And now you can just rotate to get that angle where you want it. And then you go back in and say, use that Alt with the mask pen, select the thing, highlight on that part there. And so you can use this kind of process. And then to get rid of the thickness, all you need to do is come through and add a polygroup polyloop around that area, which is going to give you that polygroup there. It's a lot easier to grab polygroups if there's a point that exists in that polygroup. So if you come through and just add another edge loop in here, now you can hold Control and Shift and isolate those parts out, and then you can use a auto groups to break that front and the back, and then get rid of that. And so now I have my single-sided mesh. So adding the thickness, if your concern is just get rid of the thickness, in a few clicks you can get rid of it. It's not 100% probably ideal for what you're looking for, but you need to have thickness to have that control option work. So there's trade-offs either way with the thickness or not. But the speed of it using the extrude option with just holding control and dragging the gizmo 3D. For me, going in and removing that secondary thickness area of the mesh, it still weighs out. So I don't know, I'd use this process. So I'll just apply that simple thickness, do whatever the heck I want with it, and then just remove it. And that usually gives me what I'm looking for on that. So hopefully that helps some. Is it possible to have a shadow box of a different size, or would I need to scale everything else to match the shadow box? So shadow box is just an object. So it has no, it's just relative to what you want it to be. So if I have this head here, and let's just append in a star. And let's say I take this star and I move it up here. Maybe scale it down a little bit. Now, if you're only using shadow boxes from Lightbox, there's definitely, you can activate shadow box on anything. So we do have, let's see where they are now. In miscellaneous. I can't remember where they're kept. They're in here somewhere. All right, so there's a 128 shadow box here, and that's just your resolution. And so for the ones that are in project folder, they're usually set to a specific resolution. But you can take any subtool and convert it to a shadow box. So if I just append this Polymesh 3D star here to the head, and now I go down to the Geometry tab and go to Shadow Box, and here you have a resolution slider and you also have a polish slider. So if you want a lot of resolution on this, just crank this up. So I can set this to like 512 and go all the way up to a max of 1024. And this is giving you like the same kind of resolution value that you'd have with a Dynamesh. So just think of it like that. And then for the polish, it's going to just it's going to polish your end result. So after you get out of shadow box, it's going to add a polish. So for this, I usually cut it down because I want my edges a little bit harsh. So I usually put around 5. And then after you have those values set, doesn't matter what subtool you have selected, you click the shadow box button here and it's going to convert that subtool to a shadow box. And so there we go. Now at this stage, you can do whatever you want with the shadow box. So if you want this to be bigger, just make it bigger. And now you can come through and mask out, and now you're going to get that shape generated. So the shadow box is just a vehicle for generating these. So if I want a small shape, you just position it, wherever you want. Let's say I want to draw something over here. Now come in, let me get a little bit of a mask brush here. Larger draw size there, Mr. Mask Pen. And so now I can draw that shape there. So that resolution is always going to be contained into this box, but you can make this, bigger or smaller and change it on the fly. So you can definitely do that. So if you're want a small detail, a large detail, you can come in and do it. And this is really handy for blocking out shapes too. So I use it a lot for just making stuff. So let's say I'm going to move it more over here. Oh, draw size. And I don't have I'm using a mouse here, which does not work for shadow box as much as I'd like it to. And so this is just using the Alt thing. If you have your transparency or your ghost turn on, you'll be able to see the shadow aspect of it. So you can come through and add different design elements here really quick with the shadow box here. So this is still a good way. It's one of the ways that I like using because it feels like drawing. You can come through and draw your designs out. And then after you're happy with it, just get out of shadow box and there's your part. So the size of it is just in relation to what you want. So after you have taken a mesh and turned it into a shadow box, you can move that box around, size it up or down. It's going to be locked into that resolution whatever you set beforehand, but the size and scale, it's all up to you. So you can definitely change that. So let me know if that helps at all there, Unseen Dragon. All right, let's see what other questions I have. So when exporting subtools for 3D printing, how can you make sure that you will print in a consistent scale? So there's options for that as well. So the number one thing, there's basically two ways to export out meshes inside of ZBrush. So you can export here through this tool palette here, or you can go to the Z plugin tab and use something like the 3D print hub here and export out through here. So these settings in here are going to export out whatever's here. So if you click this update size ratio button, you're going to be able to get your choices chosen for you, and then whatever's in these sliders here, when you export this out, this is the values that are going to be contained in that mesh. So if I export this out using this, it's going to give me these values here. Now, if you export through the tool palette over here, it's going to look at the combination of your XYZ size and also your export scale. So for this shape here, it's going to look at the geometry size, and it's going to look at these values here, and it's going to look at the XYZ size. So XYZ size is basically 2 for this one, and then it's going to go down to the export scale here, and then it's going to look at this scale slider. So if I export this file out through the tool palette, export, it's going to export this out at XYZ, all these values here, multiplied by this export scale. So the scale's 1 now, and then everything else here is 2, 1, 1, 1.5, 2, 2. So it's going to export this out at 2 by 4 by or 2, all these by 1. So my math brain is not kicked in yet. So it's going to do it at 1.05 by 1.99 by 1.99, and that is the size you're going to get out if you export out of the tool palette. If this export scale down here is changed to 10, now it's going to take 10 and multiply it by these, and that's going to be your size. So if you're doing it out of the tool palette, that is how the size is going to export out. Now there's some projects, if you load them in, you'll see that they will have a export size set already. So if you go to these projects, and there's some jewelry bands in here. So you can see this signet ring here has an XYZ size of 2, but then if we go down to the export scale here, you can see it has a size of 12. So 12.6 times 2 is now giving you your largest bounding box dimension. And that's if you export out of this export value here. So when you import stuff into ZBrush, it's going to look at the size of it. So it will hold stuff if you import it in. But when it gets in, it's going to resize your world environment, the object, to 2 inside of ZBrush. And it's going to take any offset values and put it into the export stuff. So little bit of confusion there. If you want some more information on that, you can go to the Z plugin tab, and there's also the Scale Master plugin here. And if you click on this button here, it's going to bring up this little cheat sheet. And if you go to page 2, it has a breakdown of just all the gobbledygook that just spilled out of my mouth. So you can read this, and hopefully that will help that work a little better. The export scale inside the FBX is going to do it similar to how the export size in the tool is. So it's going to look at the XYZ size multiplied by the export scale, and that should be giving you the values you're going to get out of the FBX export import. The only other thing that will change that is if you do it through that 3D print hub, which is going to look at those sliders. So I don't know if that helps. It may not. All right, a few more questions because I'm almost over time here. My tangents took too long today. Yes, there are a lot of similarities to Dynamesh, and so the question was asking, the Shadowbox and Dynamesh seem to have a lot in common. They both seem to have a tessellated cube that projects the mesh. Yes, so there's a lot of similarities in there. The Shadowbox is using the Dynamesh stuff. Yep. Is there a quick way of creating a messy knot of cables with them not interpenetrating? How messy are you talking about, Seagull Rush? Because the interpenetration, you're going to have to do it all by your, you're going to have to make it that way. So let's say I have a cylinder here, and then, let's see what we're going to do here. We'll do this one quick, because I have an idea. It's probably not going to work, but we're going to do it. So I'm going to start with my part here, so just one cylinder. And I'm just going to scale this down. And basically, talking about a mess of wires, so like a whole bunch of wires going together, and not having them intersection. So basically what I'm going to create first is a cross section of what I want this to be. So here I have this part here. I'm going to then take this one, maybe scale this down a little bit more, move that there, move this one a little bit bigger, and take this one and move it over here. And the goal here, as Seagull mentioned, is he doesn't want them to interpenetrate, so he wants them all separate. So I'm creating a cross section of this, what this wire would look like. So maybe a bunch of little wires here, and I'm making sure that none of these are interpenetrating. So they're all getting where they need to go and not making a total mess. And you can do this as long as you want. So there we go. So something like that. Now you notice now I did this from the top down, so if I rotate the side here, you can see all the sizes are different. So what I want to do is I want to find the middle area here, and I'm going to do that masking option again. So holding Control and Alt and masking across the top surfaces, all those. And there's two ways you can do this next step. One way is I can just center on that point there, and I can scale these up. And then you can use scale to come through and just scale them so they're all the same axis. So this is a little modeling trick where you basically just take all the points and you scale them together, and now it gives you a flat surface. You can also just use clip. So if I hold Control and Shift and now say select the clip curve, and I come across these and apply my clip curve here, and it's now going to get them all flat. So now I have something like this. I can turn my floor off. Now the next thing here, we're going to see what this does. So there's two ways you can handle this now. So I can come through and make this a tri-parts brush really quick, which is probably going to be my solution here. So to use this, I'm going to use slice, and I'm going to use the slice rectangle. So I'm going to make 3 polygroups here, and I'm going to use the slice rectangle, which I can come through and draw out like this. And when I release, 1, 2, and 3. And then I can isolate this bottom part there, and then go to polygroups and autogroups that. Ooh, not autogroups that. No one wants autogroups on that. Let's do this correct. There we go. So now I have 3 polygroups on that. So I've just created this shape here. I can make this a little bit larger so it's more squarish. Squarish is always better when using insert mesh brushes, especially in tri-parts formation. So there we go. And now I want to draw it out on my surface like this. So brush, create insert mesh, new. And I'm going to go and grab a sphere 3D, make that a poly mesh, go to brush. Actually, got to go stroke first. Doing this fast. It's the fast mode. Then we're going to go to modifiers, turn on all this, turn off my polyframes, and now draw this out. And now I have my crazy bunch of wires, and each of these wires should not be interpenetrating. So they're all laid on top of each other. If you want to twist, that's going to be a little bit harder there. You can definitely move this around and kind of get some spins on it, and hopefully none of those parts should intersect, but now you have all separate wires across there. So maybe that might work for you. Creating different things. Oh, I don't know. So we had a question about special event or for Christmas last stream of the year. Maybe. I haven't determined if I am going to take the Tuesday after next off or not yet. So that's the determining factor. So I may or may not be. It's on the schedule for me to stream the week after next, but I haven't decided yet. So let me know. All right, a few more questions here, then I'm going to have to sign off. So can you explain how the polygroup action works in the zmodeler, like picking polygroups and copy a polygroup to another poly and how to unselect the polygroup? So this one is definitely a little interesting as well. There is an Ask ZBrush video that explains this in a little bit more depth, so I'm just going to run through it quick here. Basically, the alt polygroup functionality is where if you click on a poly and hold Alt, it's going to apply this Alt temporary polygroup. And wherever this polygroup is applied, your next action, no matter what the target is also going to affect that area. So if I Q-mesh a single poly here, you can see those other ones are going to go with it. Now, if you want to revert back to the polygroup color you have here, you're not going to be able to do that unless you undo, which will get you back to here, or you can copy the polygroup and then paste it again. So to copy a polygroup, you can hover over this here and select polygroup. And down here at the bottom, there's modifiers here. So holding the shift key is basically just switching your modifier to pick existing. So I can use this manually by doing this, or I can hold shift. So since I have these polygroups recolored or they're changed, and now I want to apply, this polygroup back to this one over here, you can just hover over the polygroup you want. Make sure you have the single poly polygroup and then pick existing, or you can just hold shift. And this will now select that polygroup. And then now, here, we'll select this one up here. Now if I want to apply that polygroup here, and I go back in here, polygroup, single poly, over right, and now I can apply that polygroup. So now I've copied this one and pasted it here. So the copying is just a modifier, a shift modifier that's basically just switching this modifier down here. So if I click and hold shift, it's going to copy that, and then now I can paste it up there. If I want this side over here, click, hold shift, copying it. Now I come up here and paste it. And so I can paste all those. If I want this one, shift click, shift click, wait for it, there we go. If I hold the shift key instead of the caps lock key, this would be a better demo, I think. I broke it. I don't know how I broke it, but I broke it. I broke something. Anyhow. Yeah, so you can see as you hover over it as well, Alt's new, Shift will pick. So if you click and hold, that's how you get it. Make sure you click, then hold, not hold, then click, because if holding and clicking will smooth instead, but then that will allow you to copy polygroups and paste them around, steal them from other sides. So I hope that helps. All right, I think that might be it. Cable coming from all kinds of different directions. So what do you mean by that, Seagull? What do you mean by different directions, like horizontal and all sorts of stuff like that? We got a little bit of delay here. It's like I'm on Mars and I'm feeding back messages to Earth. The type delay. Wait for it. Wait for it. Yeah, because the interpenetrating part for the curves is definitely going to be, you can move them out, but there's no way to get ZBrush to look at that and adhere to it. It's always going to interpenetrate. So you can make the curves all over, but you can't guarantee that they're not going to interpenetrate. So if you do something like this, it's going to give you the best result because you can control the penetration before it's drawn out. But if they're going all over the place, or twisting is going to be your best kind of result. But it's going to be hard to get them not to interpenetrate. Now you could create something like I could take one of these and make it a crazy spiral around it. And put the bend in here and make sure they don't interpenetrate in that fashion. And then you just need to make sure that the points line up to generate it. So there are ways you could probably get it to work. It just depends what you're looking for. All right. Well, thank you all for coming and spending your morning with me. I appreciate it. So once again, you are watching, or were watching, because now we're almost done, the Ask ZBrush Live version of Twitch here, our Twitch channel. So once again, if you go to ZBrushLive.com, you can find all information on what is happening. So we have a whole bunch of different things. These are always, redistributed and upload afterwards as well. If you want to watch Solomon make Legos in ZBrush, which I think he's insane. That's a whole lot of work there. So he's making some Legos there using that. So there's also everything else, so you can scroll through these and get replays of a lot of stuff. If you guys want to be involved and want to take part and be someone that is streaming on our site, there is a Creatives Apply here. You can fill out a form and then be one of our streamers on here. And we are looking to make this 24/7, constantly ZBrush. So it doesn't matter if you have like something you like doing, or you just, every day you do it, like you just go home and sculpt for an hour, why not sculpt and have it on Twitch? So definitely apply if you are interested. So it doesn't hurt to apply because, I don't know, it just doesn't. So we're looking for people all the time. So definitely come out and apply. If you guys want to see the past answers to all the Ask ZBrush stuff, we're up to 37 videos on volume 2 now, and so you can go to our YouTube channel here. And if you guys are looking for specific questions, these are all meta tagged. So if you guys are searching something like Ask ZBrush topology, it should give you a list of stuff that contains anything related to topology. So there's a lot of stuff in here on that. Also, if you don't find your answers here, you can just tune into another stream as well and ask any of our streamers that are on Twitch. You can go to our forums, which is ZBrushCentral.com, and you can also go to our support area, which is support.pixologic.com. So definitely send that retopology one in, so make sure you do that. I saw we had that question for this stream here, so send that in with the support ticket, especially if it is repeatable, and then we can get looked at and get fixed. So thank you all for turning out. Next week, Paul will be doing his Did You Know That? And Paul goes through and does voting on his stuff, so you can vote to see what he's going to do his tangents on. I just come in and I try to get you guys the questions you guys ask, because that's the main thing with this one here. And then I just kind of pick things that I'm in a tangent on. So today we did negative booleans. So that's it. So thank you all, and have a good day. Happy ZBrushing.